What's therapeutic ketosis and why don't you like it? Therapeutic ketosis is very high fat, low, low protein levels or moderate protein levels is the approach. And it has its place, like for epilepsy and a number of other conditions, that can actually help reset certain conditions, in particular neurological conditions, stuff like that, or like people having severe conditions of severe type 2 diabetes that is actually moving towards type 1 diabetes. And so, you're trying to minimize the amount of blood sugar. You're trying to control those factors and trying to re-regulate that body. So it does have its purpose, but it's not for everyone because it's very catabolic. Long term, it'll break down your tissue. It'll stuff up your thyroid. It's not indicated. It will reverse T3 to very high levels, which are, again, not good to put your thyroid in the toilet. So this is not traditional hypothyroidism, but it's basically, so it's not Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune thing, which is completely different, but putting your thyroid in the toilet will affect your, the regulation of your temperature in your body, your hormonal system, can be in the toilet as well, all these sort of things. So it's not a good idea to do these, but short term, for a couple of months, to correct certain conditions, they are very useful. That's why we do certain things for specifically therapeutic purposes. But people have specific conditions for them. They're not for the general public, And so when I criticize people that are doing them when they don't need to do them. And they can actually end up with sarcopenia and a lot of other issues long term. So not advised at all.
Larry, just as a small segue, you were mentioning the thyroid when it comes to therapeutic ketosis. I was doing some research lately. Have you ever heard about polar T3 syndrome?
I've heard a bit, but not a lot. What have you heard?
No, it's really interesting. I was fascinated by it because it's a form of hypothyroidism. It's induced by the stress of being in really cold conditions. So it happened to Arctic explorers. And I think it was like a German doctor that first characterized it. But it's really interesting because they were noticing how some of the explorers seem to be like low focus, low energy, and it turned out that simply being in a harsh environment, induced those changes to their thyroid.
Yeah. Look, I've as I said, I've heard a bit about this, but I don't know enough about it. I'm not an expert. I haven't looked into it. I think somebody else asked me as well. One of my friends asked me, and as I said to him, I said, I don't see it in the Inuit that live in that naturalistic environment.
Mm-hmm.
This is explorers and people that went to those areas. I don't know what they were eating exactly, and there's potentially their diet, their preparation. There's a lot of factors at play that could have brought this on. And I'm not going to sit there and say, well, this is caused by this or that, when it's really very speculative. We don't have these are observations, they're not experiments. We haven't actually replicated similar conditions to be able to say, yes, these are the driving factors. So I usually avoid the answering these issues for the simple fact I usually say, no, I don't know. And the observations with too many confounders, because they are, So, I mean, a lot of people use this sort of stuff, and I go, why are you using this sort of stuff? You're just using this sort of stuff to push a narrative. That's all you're doing. You're just trying to justify either carbs or justify some other thing in order to basically, push a certain line where you're using something that's not even measured properly, you don't even know what's actually causing it correctly, and all these sort of things, and you've got an agenda and you're manipulating the facts to suit your agenda. And I really find that offensive and annoying when people do that. I like to slap them down, and severely. And Bart does as well, because it's really annoying when people do that. But, I mean, Fifrost sort of question is a legitimate question in this case, because a lot of people ask me, why am I critical of therapeutic ketosis? And Bart is as well, because we are both considerate that it has its place for a short amount of time for people with specific ailments. Outside that, it is not a healthy thing to be running very high ketone levels. It just isn't. It's not healthy. No tribal society ever, they actually consume good levels of protein and good levels of fat, and they don't neglect those important animal nutrients, and they don't, exclude one in favor of the other. They consider both as important. And we tend to, for healthy people, you should be getting near 1-to-1 when it comes to protein and fat. For women, that's for healthy men. For healthy women, it's usually about 1.2 fat to 0.8 in sort of ratios, which ends up being around the 20-25 odd for women. For men, 30 to 35%, maybe 40% if they're bodybuilders, stuff like that. And somebody that's doing quite a bit of physical stuff, about 35%, and general men about 30 odd percent is sort of my gauge. And it's the same thing with women, 20, 25, 30, depending on what your physical activity is and all that sort of stuff. If you're a bodybuilder woman, get up to 30. If you're quite active and all that, get up to 25. If you're probably about 20 odd is fine, but wouldn't go below that, and definitely wouldn't go down to 15 or below. That's just too low, and long term your health will suffer. Because you don't only need for structural material that you turn over. You also, there's a whole lot of enzymes that are being transcripted that require amino acids. So, and most of the studies that say, oh, you need 0.8 or all this, that's just based on cellular turnover. They're not taking into consideration all these other things, your enzymes and a whole lot of other things that are required. And repair, that also requires additional amino acids. And actually, some of the amino acids actually can lower oxidative stress and actually act as an antioxidant, part of the antioxidant system. So there's a whole lot of raft of additional purposes. And so as you age, you have more senescence. You actually need more protein rather than less. And what do we do to our elderly? We encourage them to consume even less. Yes, say no more.